So we've got the case here from the clone. Front panel's inserted. It's got these two wings here that hold the front panel in place that are, again, different from the original case. We've got our motherboard here, which, to be somewhat like the original, is going to sit someplace in here. Might even end up slid back like that. That might make more sense. I'm going to have to notch out, I think, this ear over here so everything sits flush. And the question becomes, I need to get the power supply in back here in a reasonable way. And room is quickly becoming a problem. Let me pull some of the wiring here off this transformer. I'm doing it off camera. Apologies, it'll make it a little easier to sit down in there and see if we can find room. Now there is room for that transformer to sit down in there. Kind of gives me a spot in here for the diode bridges to mount down. Of course, this temporary power cable's in the way. I'm going to pull it off as well. It's just extra wires hanging out I don't need hanging out. This transformer's kind of back in this corner, maybe. Oh, I keep bumping the camera. Apologies. What are you hitting up against? Yeah, this is going to be tricky to all get in here. Because ultimately what I want to be able to do is lift this entire assembly out to sit it aside. And I'm hoping to extend the power cables to the back plane long enough to be able to do that. So I can pull this out and kind of sit it to the side to make it easier to see what's going on in the machine, really for demonstration. Lift this mess out of here and set this back inside. Start to decide where stuff's going to go. I can get it really right tight against the front panel, but that would make removing it difficult. I really want to kind of notch there. Let me mark this back here just to kind of get a visual look at what things look like. Really, the motherboard. And it occupies that space. Basically meaning I've got the room back in here for power supply components. It's not a lot of room. Well, here's, I need to be able to have access to the slots back here as well. I'm gonna strip some of this down a bit, make it a little bit easier to, well, I thought I was going to make it easier to do. That's really not making it easier. If the transformer's in there. The diode bridges would have to be someplace in here. They do need to be mounted to the bottom here for heat flow. I can certainly get them both in there. Cap will not work up against the fan. This is going to mean bringing the DC power to the cap and then back around, which I don't like. And I'm going to have to work out something that can sit in here for the plus and minus 15 caps. This is obviously going to be way too big, but I kind of knew that coming into this. But that's probably about the best I'm going to get it. Oh, had a crimp fail. No surprise. Got to think about how I'm going to bring power in. Power's actually coming in back here. If I just come up to a power strip here on the back. Oh, this is going to be interesting to get together. Have it be enough out of the way. I wouldn't dare much more weight than this transformer. In this case, it's not super solid. It'll be fine for this build. You know, I guess maybe it's time I strip all these wires back. I think I'm going to pull the wires and the terminal strip and the other parts loose and get all the wires loose and start to just think where stuff's going to sit in here. So there's kind of the challenge. I've got that original, or that reproduction power board that could potentially be set down in here and used for the plus and minus 15, which would make it look a little more authentic. In the original system, the transformers all sitting over here. They're mounted up to the back. This one's way too heavy to be mounted to this back. It needs to be down at the bottom of the case. So, what seemed like a huge case, not nearly as much room as one would have liked, but that is life. You know, AC power is going to have to come in. It's going to have to route around the switch connections here, back to the transformer. I really hate the fact that I'm going to come power. I really don't want to extend these leads. I want to keep the diode bridges close to, you know, these leads shouldn't be any longer than they are. This is plus and minus 15, and this is the plus 8 bridge. So I'm going to have a fair amount of cable to get to the filter cap and get back around, and there's just no way this transformer would sit in here. It just really doesn't. Like I said, it's just way too heavy to be up on that back wall. It's going to have to sit there, and that's about the largest transformer I could physically get in here. Bring it forward about there, and that leaves me some room here to get to the I/O ports. small as those are, they would clear. I don't think, though, I have band clamps for these. I'll have to look. I've got some other computer style electrolytics like this. I'll have to look. Some of them have clamps and see what I've got, because he's just a little bit big there. He's not horrid. Anyhow, I will keep putzing around here. I won't do it on camera and try to get a better layout. So, we've kind of taken a look at my moving parts around to figure out how they're going to fit in the case. And I've made progress here, and we'll take a look at some photos here instead of shooting videos. So this is partly through with the power supply installed. We've of course got the power transformer here in the back. I've got a diode bridge here for the plus and minus 15 volt rails, and a diode bridge back here for the plus 8 rail. I have sanded off the powder coat off the inside of the case, and there's heatsink compound underneath these, using the bottom of the case as a heatsink. This is a reproduction of the power supply for the original Altair 8800. I'm using this simply as filter capacitors for the plus and minus 15 volt rails, so there's a common ground along here. And I've got the positive side of these two capacitors here going to the plus 15, and then these capacitors are swapped around, so the positive leads are to the ground rail, and the negative lead back here hooks up to the negative 15. And the power is brought out on a couple of leads here, white and red, that run out the back of the case here. So this is with it partly assembled. The power cord's been brought in and routed around, and it's just kind of sitting here at the moment. You may notice right here in the middle there's a bolt with a bunch of locking nuts and crimp joint connectors on it. This is the common ground for the entire system. So I again sanded off the powder coat to get a good physical connection to the bottom metal of the case. And then locked onto that on, and then the ground coming from the diode bridge here. So the ground of that diode bridge comes in and clamps to it. The ground of this board is clamped into it. The protective earth coming from the line cord is clamped to it. So all my grounds have a common reference point right here. We walk back through the pictures, just a little more detailed look down at the two diode bridges and that stack of common grounds. And another view, apparently the same thing. Kind of a close-up of these capacitors on the board. I'm not going to stuff the rest of the board out. There's no reason to. It's really just a carrier. For these filter caps, I just drilled some holes in the case, used some standoffs, to mount it in there. Of course, because we didn't actually talk about this, let's jump back to here. You can see I've got that primary DC filter cap, the one for the 8 volt rail, mounted up here on the side. There just wasn't room to really stand it up down here, and that turned out to be a good spot to mount it. I've got sufficient clearance to get the card cage in and out and to clear everything here, so I think that worked out pretty well. This is a little later on in the build, so I've started to do some wire management. The primary power leads that go to the motherboard are in this piece of I don't know what you call this stuff. The tubing material here wraps around, and the wires come over here to come over to the motherboard. The power coming into the system, so the AC line cord is wrapped as well, and there's that ground lead coming around. You can see here in the back the power switch from the system is here, and then the leads that go over to the actually switch the power in the transformer are again in some of that sleeving. And here we've got again the primary power that'll get brought to the back plane, and the idea here is I'll be able to lift this entire back plane out of the system and set it off to the side. And there's sufficient length in the power leads that wrap all the way around to the side here that'll have room to lift it out and set it down. And then the ribbon cable for the front panel that connects to the second card here actually will also have sufficient length to do that. It's really another look down in as I'm working power management and kind of cleaning things up. Look down into the case with everything kind of fitted from the top. I've added a little bit more of that sleeving onto the switch leads here. So we've got the power switch underneath and into the two sides of the header block up here. For the power switch, I brought the power and ground around to the terminal block here, and I'm using a terminal block here because it's really easy. I've got a set of switching power supplies I can just plug into here as well. My color coding is red for +8, black for ground. The brown is the -15 and white yellow here. I used white wire, but white or yellow is my +15. So there it really is in the case. All the boards are in except for the floppy disk controller in this state. You know, it's come together pretty well. That sits down in there pretty well. I don't have room here to add 4 more slots. Partly dictated by the way this case is internally with these brackets that hold the front panel in place. You know, the inside of this reproduction case is not the same as the original. But again, things have fit in here well. You really can't see it here, but there's 12 gauge leads coming up to the filter cap, and then 12 gauge leads. These red and black are 12 gauge wrapping around, so I've got plenty of current capacity. I should hopefully get really smooth voltage here. 12 gauge was probably a bit of overkill for the 5 amp draw I seem to have in the system, but it's the wire I had on hand, and it's what I used. Apparently a duplicate photo of the same thing. Kind of an angle view looking down in. You know, I'm pretty happy with this. This cord, like I said here, that brings power around, this is laid along the channel here, and I can just slide it up from behind the transformer and out the side over here as I rotate the card cage out. That really will let me set it next to the machine so I can get in and troubleshoot and those kind of things easier, and I think it'll make a nice demonstration at the Vintage Computer Fest. And there it is with the front panel turned on, or with the system powered up. So this was actually running a memory test out of the alt monitor, just as kind of my initial test. So, you know, I'm pleased. It's turned out well. It looks pretty authentic from the outside. It's as vintage as I could make it on the inside. You know, pretty happy with it. So there's kind of where we are with the build. We'll talk soon.